Hello, I'm Kenny from Albot, and today I'll be talking about the C500 Mark II, how I'm using it, things I love, and why I think it's one of the best bang-for-your-buck cameras available right now, rivaling even the Sony Venice and Alexa LF. Now, I'm rarely a first adopter of technology, and sometimes I get burned, but the morning they announced the C500, I was actively kitting out a C200 package to replace my C100 Mark II. I stopped immediately, told Film Tools I was absolutely going to buy one and to hold it for me, and I ended up with serial number 8, which I think is cool. The key here is flexibility. With the C500, I've got a lot of options and can scale up or down depending on the client, and personally it gives me everything I could want when making my own films. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a situation that the C500 Mark II wouldn't excel in, and I will attempt to lay that thought process out for you now, but there is a written version of this up on Pro Video if you'd rather read. After practicality, which we'll get to, the most important thing is, of course, the image. I weigh features very highly when considering a camera, and some are make or break, like I really love internal NDs. But at the end of the day, I do want the best image possible. After testing the Venice, Alexa LF, FX9, and C500 Mark II, I discovered that the C500 was the easiest to match to the LF, which I found to be the case with the C300 Mark II and the original Alexa. Now, that doesn't say anything specifically, but it does lend itself to the idea that the C500 is as good as the big cameras on campus. If I'm getting 90% of the way to an LF for a tenth of the price, I'm a happy camper. A few things, I'm really loving the dynamic range on this camera, as demonstrated in my first practical camera test out in the desert, and in the grade it's really nice. Under normal circumstances, I'm not seeing any noise or artifacts like other people seem to. The colors are great, especially after I whipped up my own picture profile, and shooting RAW just unlocks so much more depth, which obviously is technically the difference between 12-bit and 10-bit, but you get what I mean. Canon cameras will famously clip pretty fast compared to ARRI, but when you keep everything under that threshold, but close, the roll-off is really pleasant. I still expose as bright as I can and then bring it down in post, but even so, the C500 seems to record very low contrast. So if you use one, I advise using the log wheels to bring the darkest areas down in the shadows just a touch to give your image some bite. The highlight feature of the C500 Mark II is, of course, the full-frame C700 sensor. I got my C100 Mark II because it was an original C500 sensor in an indie package, and this is kind of the same situation, just amped up to 11. Now, I was never a 5D shooter, opting instead for the AF100 as an upgrade from my XL2, but full-frame is so fun to shoot. Now, you absolutely can match the characteristics of Super 35 and full frame, but the additional photo sites do give you a cleaner, sharper image, as well as the opportunity to more easily get that nice blurry background that everyone loves on a perceptually wider lens. To that end, shooting full frame may require you to get some new lenses, but if you're getting hired on a gig that doesn't care about full frame, you can just switch over to the Super 35 mode and use the ones you're already used to. And you've got the PL or EF options that are quick swappable on the body. In regards to 6K, resolution is a tool but not a barometer for quality. I think everyone would rather shoot an Alexa at HD than an iPhone at 4K, right? A good sensor beats out a large output every day. That being said, and Red has kind of made this their thing, higher than average resolutions can give you a lot of options. When given the option, David Fincher, for instance, shoots 6K and 8K for a 5 or 6.5K extraction respectively, to give him the maximum amount of real estate for reframing and stabilization in post, which is something that Fincher famously uses on nearly every clip, along with split comps. Furthermore, their deliverables are either 2K or 4K, so when they kick out their final render, the image is still super clean and sharp, even though they haven't used the whole image recorded necessarily, which is a great option to have. If your delivery is 1080p, 6K gives you a ton of room for interesting or even helpful setups. As a classic example, I can set up a 2-shot in a car and effectively have 3 camera angles in the form of a wide and 2 punch-in close-ups. Coupled with my Odyssey 7Q Plus and the Titan extract function, I can actually shoot in that way with 4K and have all 3 shots saved individually, and you can even live switch between the 3, which could be big for shooting interviews or something like that, or just saving time. As best practice, you always aim to shoot better than your intended display. So if your deliverable is 1080p 8-bit, you'd want to shoot something like 4K 10-bit. In the same way, 4K 10-bit deliverable calls for a 6K 12-bit recording format, etc., etc. In terms of RAW, XFAVC looks great, but there's absolutely way more color information in the cinema raw light footage I've shot. It obviously is going to take up more hard drive space overall, but if the best image is called for, RAW is there, and it's 12-bit, 2.1 gigabit per second glory. In regards to log, previously, C-Log 3 was designed for the less than ideal noise situation in the shadows on the C300 at the cost of some dynamic range. But in the C500, that is no longer a problem, so you can go back to shooting C-Log 2. C-Log 3 still looks great, but for the best DR, lowest noise, C-Log 2 is definitely the move. I don't really see a reason why you'd want to shoot C-Log 3 on the C500. With XFAVC, you've got 10-bit 422 footage at 410 megabits per second, which is lovely and a broadcast standard. You'll also be best served shooting a touch overexposed, like I said, if you can, and bringing that down in post just for the best image. The Canon sensors really love light, but that being said, shooting up to 4000 ISO is totally acceptable, and you could likely lean on 6400 or higher with some noise reduction in post. In any case, shoot C-Log 2, or if you need, 709 if it just needs to be handed off, but there is an owl color 709 profile if you need it. Moving on, more so than 4K or higher resolutions, HDR is the dark horse in the camera race. Dolby Vision and formats like it are rapidly becoming the standard across televisions, and for good reason. HDR is markedly better looking, when done right, than an SDR image at the same resolution. Being able to see more deeply into the shadows and bright areas of an image can give your footage far more life and realism than a simple boost to the K count, but also it's an option. You know, all of this is about options. If, you know, with HDR, you can go to the extremes, whereas with SDR, you can't. You know, same thing with 1080 or 4K in the sense that you can use it to your advantage or not. I personally am not mastering for 4K yet, but it's nice to know that the camera is capable. Now, there is a difference between recording in HDR and displaying it. Red's HDRX and to a degree Canon's new DGO are more akin to recording HDR as we would with multiple exposures in the stills world. But in the case of the C500, it's the fact that it can record 15 stops of latitude that makes it a high dynamic range camera, not some new exposure method. Traditional monitors or TVs can show at best 8 stops of latitude, so obviously there's going to be some adjustments made from the 15 to the 8 in the grade. The difference is that new HDR displays can show more of that range. You don't shoot in HDR, you master for it. There's a few different standards, but for those keeping score, HDR10 and Dolby Vision are the clear front runners. I'm at this point, I'm almost speaking out of turn because I'm not well versed. That's my next step in life, figuring out HDR and audio. I'm trying to get better at audio. I hope the audio on this sounds nice. So that's the image. Let's move on to features. As I mentioned, the practicality of the camera will come into sharp relief when you're using it on a daily basis. Small things will start to stand out and really grate on you over time, so it's important to really give any given camera hard scrutiny and see if it stands up to your use. To use computers as an example, my PC is pretty fast. It handles editing most anything I throw at it, and if I ever need to, I can just use proxies. Very rarely, though. It's great. However, when I go and use stabilization on a clip, it takes a bit of time, to figure it out. When I reviewed that computer Puget Systems let me borrow, I noticed that I was never waiting for renders or effects or anything, and my workload could be increased by a significant margin because I wasn't getting distracted. When the stabilizer takes 30 seconds, you'll instinctively just kind of reach for your phone and just see, oh, did someone text me or what's going on Instagram for a second? Did I get an email? But it all breaks your flow state and can make editing feel more like a chore than it needs to, and you have enough of those distractions, you'll just kind of stop. In the same way, little things on the camera that can get in your way or make you look for external solutions can become cumbersome or even annoying over time. At this point in my life, I absolutely demand in-camera ND filters. I can't think of a reason why I'd prefer to use matte box NDs, and I'm squarely anti-variable ND, the screw-on kind, not the FX9 kind. That's kind of cool. And this camera has 10 whole stops of ND, which is 4 more than I'm used to. It also has built-in XLRs, which is great for smaller shoots where I don't have a sound person or said sound person is mixing directly into the camera. With the expansion unit, you can get an additional 2 XLR inputs, bringing the total of 4. I've seen folks grumble about the location of the gain wheels on the assistant side, but I'd rather them be on that side than the top handle again, and I'm usually not riding them that much anyway. In regards to indie shooting situations, if I'm a solo operator or working on something that doesn't need the toppest of quality, I can easily just detune the C500 to shoot at Super 35 for lenses, and even 1080p, even in RAW if I want, if you need the extra quality. Tons of people use the Alexa Mini to shoot small budget music videos and shorts and the like, but that camera is designed for a crew, meaning that concessions are going to have to be made, such as with audio. It's not a single person camera. In regards to the EIS, it does work, but it's better suited for smoothing out bumps in a track or standing still or something than full on handheld, although it does sort of work. Face detect autofocus, on the other hand, is absolutely amazing, and I'd use that on tons of stuff. Even though it works great at an indie level, the C500 is squarely built for larger productions. SDI, PL, EF swappable, even B4, timecode, XLRs, ND, the RAW workflow, 4K, 6K, 15 stops of dynamic range, anamorphic modes, false color, HDR, LUTs, and all in a tiny little form factor. It's got nearly anything that you could want in a cinema camera. Only the Sony Venice seems to have more going on, and it's Netflix approved, and it's ACES support, and it's got broadband spec, and it's ACES support. Also, dual pixel autofocus is the truth, and it's not just for autofocus. It also allows for AF boosted manual focus, which I've yet to test, but also the fantastic focus assist box, which visually shows you if you've missed or come up short on your focus pull with these little arrows. Which it only works with EF lenses, but it's way better than having to squint and sort of get your face an inch away from the monitor or rely on focus peaking. That little feature alone is amazing. Also, you can use the camera on gimbals. I don't really use gimbals, but the C500 is so small that it can easily be run on a simple one like the Ronin S, which for some people is a game changer. Usability. One thing I've loved about shooting on the EOS cameras, the cinema EOS cameras, is the body itself. Some people have gripes about the LCD placement on the C300, which I totally get. The stupid clamshell was bad. But overall, the camera crushes in the ergonomics department. In the C500's case, it's super small and light. The backlit side buttons are already set up with your most used features, but are all easily remappable. And with the Cinema EOS cameras, it's as simple as battery, media, lens, go. The Alexa Mini uses C-Fast cards, which are more ubiquitous than the CF Express cards in the C500. But as more cameras switch over to that, it'll be less of an issue, probably. So that is one thing. For now, though, media is a bit of a struggle for the C500, but not as bad as it is for Red. It's also super easy to use slow-mo now, with a dedicated button on the side that switches over to the shooting mode instantaneously. It's also got a touchscreen, which I really love. So in regards to my setup, I've had to do a lot less customization to get the image that I want than I did with the C100. But after using it more, I will likely find little things to tweak. We just got to be able to go out and shoot. First thing I did was make my own picture profile. So I set up some color charts and did my best to match the C500 to an Alexa using a vector scope, which is not dead on, but it's pretty damn close. And normally I design my own monitoring LUT, but after making the picture profile, I've learned that I'm pretty happy with the K1S1 LUT from Ari. So I've just loaded that into the C500, and I'll use that for quick, turnarounds. And that's definitely something I'll work on in the future, but for now it's just fine, and I can make simple grading things trivial. Luckily, C-Log2 and Log-C are nearly identical gamma curves, so getting the color close was more valuable than messing with the black point and whatnot, like I did with the C100 version of Owl Color. And you can get either version of Owl Color at the Owlbot shop. Generally, I'm shooting the super sampled 4K, but we'll switch over to 6K RAW when I'm on a gig that I'd like to flex on, basically, like a commercial or something. Honestly, I'll use the 2K proxies when it's something quick for myself and I'd rather save hard drive space, like web stuff or just goofing around. But I'm telling you, like the being able to record proxies onto the SD card that are high enough quality that they beat out my C100, which I use for tons of web stuff or just general shooting for friends or whatever, like that's pretty cool to be able to. It sounds stupid to use like a really expensive camera for such a small thing, but again, it's all about flexibility. I haven't used it yet, but when I use the Super 35 crop, I'll just go back to using my Sigma 18 to 35 But at the moment, I'm using a set of Nikkor primes when shooting full frame, primarily because the 50 1.2 and the 24 2.8 that I've had for my Nikon F2 for so many years are awesome, and I'll give the 105.4 a run when necessary as well. I've also got an RZ to EF adapter if I really want to feel fancy and use my medium format lenses, but I'm thinking a set of 645 lenses might be apropos and cheaper to buy, and I can get a whole set and it'll look really nice. The C500 is a bit power hungry, so I've got a D-tap to XLR cable to run my cinema batteries off camera instead of using the BPA60 or having to use the V2 expansion unit. On a tripod, I have a little V-lock clamp that holds the battery, but when handheld, I'll either use a MOLLE pouch or even just the pouch in my hoodie. That being said, for a quick shoot that's like under 4 hours, I've had no issue just using the BPA60 and just turning the camera off when I'm not using it. Probably get an hour and a half runtime, but I really do like the D-tap to XLR. I've also got a bright tangerine full cage for rigging purposes, the advanced cage, which I've got top and bottom rails, 3/4 and 1/4 inch taps all over the place, and a top handle, place for my monitor, which I use a Noga arm instead of the monitor attachment from Canon for personal reasons. And Bright Tangerine's nice lift-off feature that lets you quickly detach the cage from any ARRI-style dovetail or the second top plate that's flipped over to attach a regular tripod plate to. I've also got a Red Rot Micro handle and spud attached to the left side so I can go handheld very comfortably. Again, it's all about flexibility and just I can build it up or break it down. Oddly enough, I feel like the C500 Mark II's only true competitor is the Sony Venice. The image may be very Alexa-like in the C500, sort of, but aside from that, only the Venice has a similar set of features and usability. Then again, you're also paying way more for the Venice, and it's a big old boy too. I think I'd struggle to think of a single gig you couldn't use this camera on, and it covers all the bases from web to doc to cinema work. Now, I sound like a massive fanboy here, but to be perfectly honest, I'm just excited. It's not often that you buy something and then you don't have many complaints. Obviously, I haven't had a ton of time to use it because I got it in December, used it on a couple gigs, and then we all stopped working. So we're going to have to wait and see how that goes. But for now, I'm really excited. So going forward, it's going to be a lot of seeing how far I can push it. So that's it for me. I hope you stuck around for this whole diatribe. Like I said, there's a written version of this up on Pro Video. If you didn't want to listen to me, it's literally the exact same thing I just said. Feel like I covered all the bases. Yeah, did I finish this? Yeah. I'm going to need another beer. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.